It's 6 p.m. on a Wednesday here in Korea. Welcome to our newscast. I'm Daniel Choi. Let's start with the headlines. North Korea's top official on interKorean affairs has died in a car accident, according to North Korea's state media. And questions remain about how his death will affect the future of interKorean ties. Back here in South Korea, output across all industries records back-to-back months of decline, mainly pulled down by the mining and manufacturing sectors. And with the unfavorable conditions abroad unlikely to improve anytime soon, the trend seems set to continue. Syrian military forces continue to advance and retake towns from the Islamic State group, a most welcome development for President Bashar al-Assad ahead of next month's peace talks in Geneva. North Korea's senior official for interKorean affairs, Kim Yang-gon, died in a car accident early Tuesday morning, according to its state media. With his death, concerns linger over whether it will take a toll in North-South relations and who will take his place. Connie Kim has our top story.
Kim Yang-gon, a high-ranking North Korean official in charge of interKorean affairs, died in a car accident on Tuesday at 6:15 a.m. The 73-year-old's death was reported Wednesday by North Korea's Korean Central News Agency, which also said Kim Jong-un will lead a state funeral for the deceased on Thursday. No further details were released. Kim Yang-gon was a secretary of the ruling Workers' Party of Korea and a member of the party's Central Committee Politburo. But he was perhaps best known as the head of the North's United Front Department, which handles interKorean affairs. He played a key role in pulling the two Koreas back from the brink of conflict after North Korea's landmine explosion near the interKorean border in August. Seoul's Unification Ministry offered its condolences on Wednesday.
The government has offered its condolences for the death of Kim, who contributed to a meaningful agreement at the August talks.
Kim was considered a dove in handling of cross-border affairs, and the general consensus seems to be that not only will it be challenging to find someone to take his place, but interKorean dialogue could deteriorate in the short term.
There is a possibility that problems will arise from the absence of a person with Kim's knowledge and experience when it comes to negotiating specific pending issues. Minor things could have a negative impact on the big picture.
Speculation has already begun about who will take Kim's place. The list of possible candidates includes Won Dong-yeon, the deputy chief of North Korea's United Front Department, who participated in a high-level interKorean meeting in February 2014, and Choi Dong-hae, a senior ruling party secretary who had been out of the public eye, but has been listed as a member of the funeral organizing committee, implying he has been reinstated. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
Turning our focus back to South Korea, the dust is settling on the landmark agreement between Korea and Japan on the wartime sex slavery issue. Critics, including most surviving victims, say it silences their international efforts to get Tokyo to take legal responsibility for its past atrocities against women. Kim Ji-yeon looks into the duality of that deal.
Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe has reiterated that he will no longer apologize to the victims of Japan's wartime sex slavery. He says a line has been drawn under the so-called comfort of women issue with this week's landmark deal struck between Seoul and Tokyo. The Japanese daily Sankei Shimbun reported Wednesday that Abe has said that he will no longer bring up the issue with Korea as a lid had been put on it, and he had that confirmed during a telephone conversation with President Park Geun-hye. And if Korea breaks its irreversible promise, Abe said it will be the end for Korea as a credible member of the international community. The latest developments are raising concerns the deal by the two sides set a bad precedent by nullifying international efforts to criminalize and force sexual slavery during times of war. In 1996, the UN Human Rights Commission released a report referring to the women as sex slaves.
The problem of violence against women during wartime had been such an invisible issue. War II, to bring this issue up, first to give it visibility, and secondly, make it an occasion on which the Japanese government could then do something.
2 years later, another UN report called for the Japanese government to compensate the victims and consider the issue criminal acts against humanity. Up until this week's deal, Seoul had referred to these reports to pressure Tokyo. But with the new agreement, the Korean government is not allowed to criticize Japan over the issue on the international stage.
We have vowed not to criticize the Japanese government over the wartime sex slavery issue, assuming Tokyo takes the necessary steps outlined in the resolution.
Civic groups representing the victims have expressed their deep disappointment with the deal. They say the hastily drawn-up agreement failed to mention Japan's legal responsibility on the matter. The vast majority of the surviving victims say they will ignore the agreement and continue striving for justice. Kim Yang-gon, Arirang News.
Korea's industrial output dropped for the second straight month in November due to sluggish exports. Business sentiment also worsened this month. Hwang Ji-hye has the numbers.
Korea's output across all industries slid 0.5% in November from a month earlier, marking 2 straight months of decline. Statistics Korea attributes the slump to a drop in production in the mining and manufacturing sectors that were hit hard by sluggish outbound shipments. Exports have dropped every month this year through November, and in October they plunged nearly 16%, the biggest drop since the height of the global financial crisis 6 years ago. And experts say the unfavorable conditions overseas are unlikely to improve anytime soon.
The growth rate is getting weaker in emerging economies and in China, on which Korean exports have relied heavily for the past 2 to 3 years.
The slump in industrial output has come about despite an improvement in domestic demand, with production in the service sector rising for a 5th straight month in November. Reflecting the gloomy production data, manufacturers' business sentiment also declined this month. The index gauging how businesses see the current economic conditions came in at 67, down a point from the previous month. A reading under 100 means pessimists outnumber optimists. To hedge against uncertainties lingering abroad and at home, like the dulling competitive edge of local exporters and the country's graying population, Finance Minister Choi Kyung-han once again emphasized pushing through structural reforms as he led his last economy-related ministers' meeting on Wednesday. Hwang Ji-hye, Arirang News.
Could the world's energy firms be facing a crisis? According to data by Standard & Poor's Capital IQ, 58 firms filed for bankruptcy protection this year, up from 20 last year. It's the second highest figure since the aftermath of the global financial crisis in 2009, when the corresponding number hit 95. The sharp increase is attributed to a drop in raw material prices, including crude oil and natural gas, which in turn decreased the profitability of the companies. Korea's air passenger traffic rose in November, with over 7.6 million people flying abroad and within the country. The Ministry of Land, Infrastructure and Transport says the nation's air passenger count jumped 14.1% last month compared to a year before. A large increase in domestic passengers bumped up the total, with a 15% rise over the same period. The number of passengers traveling overseas increased by nearly 14%. The growth in the number of international passengers is attributed to growth in flights by low-cost carriers, more visitors from abroad, and Koreans' rising demand for overseas travel. The Korean government is looking to ease its duty-free license system, which would allow cities other than Seoul and Jeju to establish new downtown duty-free stores. The current system requires each region to report an on-year increase of 300,000 foreign tourists. The proportion of both the number of foreign users and sales of the region's current duty-free stores must also surpass 50%. The government is also looking to reform the 5-yearly bidding process for licenses introduced back in 2013, which resulted in Lotte Duty-Free and Walker Hill Duty-Free Store losing their permits. This comes after President Park Geun-hye slammed lawmakers on Monday for changing the license system without adequate debate. According to government authorities, the Korea Customs Service has come up with a draft for the revised customs law. The task of redrawing Korea's electoral map is still on lawmakers' to-do list, but they don't have much time to get it done. That means candidates who have registered for an upcoming general election in April could soon find themselves in a chaotic situation. Shin Se-min has the details.
The National Assembly passed 47 bills on Monday, but left a raft of other more contentious bills up in the air. Lawmakers also have yet to resolve the matter of redrawing Korea's electoral map before the current one expires at the end of the year. That could cause major problems for candidates registering for an upcoming general election in April who could see their districts eliminated when a new map is drawn.
Tomorrow is the last day of the year, and with the redistricting issue still unresolved, we expect there to be chaos among the candidates starting in the new year.
The National Election Commission said Wednesday it'll allow candidates to campaign temporarily, even if the electoral map hasn't been finalized. The election watchdog also said if the two main rival parties fail to compromise on the issue by January 8th, the end of the current extraordinary session, the NEC will have no choice but to come up with its own plan. The NEC says as of Wednesday at noon, there are 768 candidates registered, which is a ratio of 3.1 to 1 based on the current number of parliamentary seats. But that number is likely to rise as registration continues through March. But the constituency issue is just one of many pending matters on the table.
At the session on Monday, a total of 47 bills were passed, an outcome of multiple discussions following on a strong desire to see the bills go through. And we expect similar results with greater cooperation.
With the clock winding down on 2015, there isn't much time left. And with Assembly Speaker Chung Ih-hwa indicating he will not exercise his authority to resolve the redistricting issue, it'll be up to lawmakers to redraw the map. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
Outside of Korea, Syrian government forces have retaken a strategic town from the Islamic State militant group. The army is advancing rapidly against both anti-government rebels and ISIS with support from Russian airstrikes. Son Jung-in brings us the latest.
Syrian military forces on Tuesday succeeded in recapturing the key town of Mahin and its surrounding hilltops from the Islamic State group. According to state news agency Sana, the army destroyed terrorist hideouts and fortifications with air support from Russian jets, which have been pounding militants in the area for nearly 3 months. Mahin, located southeast of Homs, was deemed crucial to ISIS due to its strategic location. Earlier in the day, Syrian government forces recaptured a key southern military base from Brigade 82 rebels in the town of Sheikh al-Maskin. The regime forces seized the base a day after taking the northern part of the town in Dera province, which was captured by rebels around a year ago. The state news agency said the army inflicted heavy losses on the militants, but did not release an official death toll. The latest developments are expected to boost President Bashar al-Assad's position ahead of peace talks in Geneva next month. The United Nations plans to bring together Syria's warring parties on January 25th to begin talks to try and end nearly 5 years of civil war. Son Jung-in, Arirang News.
Airstrikes from a U.S.-led coalition have killed 10 Islamic State leaders in Iraq and Syria in the last month. Giving a briefing in Baghdad on Tuesday, Washington's spokesman for the campaign against ISIS, Steve Warren, said that one of them, French national Sharaf al-Muaddan, had direct links to the ringleader of the terror attacks on Paris in November. The U.S. Army colonel said al-Muaddan was killed in Syria on December 24th. He said the U.S. will continue to hunt ISIS leaders who are working to recruit, plan, and inspire attacks against the United States. And over in Pakistan, a suicide bombing outside a government office in Islamabad has killed at least 26 people and seriously injured dozens more. According to local police, the attacker rammed his motorcycle into the main gate of the office building and detonated his explosives. A faction of the Pakistani Taliban has claimed responsibility for the attack. The militant group is known to be fighting to overthrow the government and establish hardline Islamist rule. The group's spokesman said it targeted the office because it's part of Pakistan's anti-terrorism war. Eastern China continues to suffer its worst smog of the year. According to China's National Weather Agency, levels of PM 2.5 in parts of Beijing reached 543 micrograms per cubic meter last night. That's more than 20 times higher than the World Health Organization's recommended maximum exposure. The figure is also higher than when Beijing issued 2 red smog alerts earlier this month. However, the authorities only issued a yellow alert this time, the second highest alert in the country's 4-tier system. Other parts of China are also being affected by the new round of heavy smog, including Tianjin and the neighboring province of Hebei. A cold front is expected to gradually disperse the smog later on Wednesday before it gets worse from Thursday. And we have come to the end of our newscast for this hour. For more updates, do tune in at 10 p.m. Korean time to Arirang for Moon Gun-young's News Center. For now, thank you for watching.